Thanks, Anne. And good morning, everyone, and welcome to those of you online or maybe in overflow space. If you're in the overflow spaces because you want to be, that's great. You don't need to be today. We've got some space, so you can also sneak into the room if you like. Welcome to all of you, and if you are a guest here with us today, welcome. We're delighted that you're here. And we've been going through a series through the summer about Old Testament characters and their stories, and we've been traveling with them to a particular point in their life where they make a bad choice, they make a mistake. And we're spending our time focusing in on that particular moment so that we can learn from their mistake and hopefully incorporate that into our own lives and not make the same mistake in our context. Now, most of the mistakes we've looked at over the summer are what the Bible would call sin. There's just people knew what the right choice was and they chose to do wrong. That's the majority of the mistakes that we've looked at. Last week, we could maybe wrestle that. Jeff talked a little bit about this. That could possibly, in the best case scenario, was just a king making a foolish choice rather than a wise choice. That was found in 1 Kings, and we're going to stay in the book of 1 Kings today because last week, Jeff took us through the story of Rehoboam listening to his buddies instead of the wise counsel of the elders. And out of that, this catastrophic event took place for this united nation that was Israel. And that is the nation splits. Right after this event that Jeff took us through, the nation splits into two. And in the north, there's Israel. In the south, there is Judah. And through the rest of the Old Testament, there's these two parallel stories being told. There's kings and there's prophets in the north, and there's kings and there's prophets in the south. And you can see some of the list of the kings in the north and the south behind me. This isn't all of them. This is just the first list of them. You can see a lot more turnover in the north to start with anyhow. And each time there's a new king, if you read through the book of 1 Kings, there's a summary statement. They were either a good king, that is, they led the nation of Israel towards Yahweh and his ways, or they were a bad king. And usually that was described by this kind of a phrase, and so king did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And so most of the kings that are listed weren't great. Some were good. And then there was this guy, Ahab, the very last guy on the bottom of the list. This king is introduced to us in 1 Kings chapter 16, and it says this: Then his son Ahab became the next king, but Ahab, son of Omri, did what was evil in the Lord's sight, even more than any of the other kings before him. And that's saying something. As though it were not enough to follow the sinful example of Jeroboam, he married Jezebel, and he began to bow down in worship of Baal. Baal was a false god of the Canaanites. He was seen as the god of fertility. So he was the god responsible to bring rain that nourished crops and that produced food for the nation's life. And Jezebel, with her encouragement, Ahab, with Jezebel's encouragement, begins to not only worship Baal, but actually build temples and altars and encourage the rest of the Israelites to forsake Yahweh and begin worshiping this false god. And any prophet of Yahweh, the one true God that spoke out against this, would get persecuted or eventually even just quietly dispatched with. And so Yahweh raises up this prophet named Elijah, who I would suggest has the most crazy, miraculous life of all the people in the Bible. And that's saying something, I know, because Paul had a pretty wild life too. But the story of Elijah is just filled with miraculous events. In chapter 17, we're introduced to Elijah, and he just bursts onto the scene. We barely know anything about him. We're just told that he's a prophet of Yahweh. And he goes and he confronts King Ahab, and he declares on behalf of Yahweh, there's going to be no rain until Yahweh decides there's going to be rain. Like that's kicking Baal where it hurts. Baal is the god of rain. And now Ahab has been told Yahweh is going to decide when it really rains. This obviously doesn't make him very popular because it actually happens and a drought hits the land. And so Elijah actually, God directs him to go into hiding. And God directs him first to go to this little brook. And he stays there. And while he's at this Kerith brook, it's called, God miraculously feeds Elijah with ravens. Ravens bring him meat and bring him bread each day. Crazy. Eventually that brook dries up because there's a drought. And so God directs him to go to this little town, Zarephath. Find this widow. She will shelter you. She will hide you from the king. And while Elijah is there, the woman's meager flour and oil supply that's used to make the staple food that will sustain them, it never runs out. They keep making bread, they keep making food, and there's food every day. God miraculously replenishes her jars of food. And while they're there, the son of the widow gets sick and she dies. And Elijah prays for this son and he's resurrected back to life. It's the first recorded resurrection in the Bible. And this isn't even the main event. Any one of those things would be crazy for us. The main event is in chapter 18, where God directs Ahab then to go confront Ahab again, tell Ahab, the king, it's going to rain soon, but let's figure out which God is really the one true God. And so this is on Mount Carmel. Some of you who have been in church know this story well. Elijah confronts 850 false prophets, 400 of Baal, 450 of another false Canaanite god. And they decide, let's see who the real God is. Make an altar, and we'll see which God consumes the altar, consumes the offering on the altar. And so 850 prophets of Baal start doing all these sorts of religious ceremonies for hours, trying to convince Baal to do something, and he doesn't. And then Elijah prays, he douses the altar with water a bunch of times, prays to Yahweh, and Yahweh answers. Fire comes down from heaven, lightning consumes it all. And the people surrounding the mountain recognize that Yahweh is the one true God. It's a huge, huge public victory for Elijah and more so for Yahweh. That's where we're going to pick up the story. But let's just fast forward for a moment. And if we were just to fast forward and skip over what we're going to look at today, we would also see in 2 Kings that Elijah was one of 2 men that actually didn't physically die. How's that for wild? Swept up into heaven by God in front of Elisha. And then in the Luke series that we were in last year, we know that Elijah was one of the 2 men with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration, where Jesus' divinity is seen for a moment while he's with Moses and Elijah on a different mountain. This is Elijah's life. It's crazy. It's crazy. He is a titan of the faith. And the truth is, when you read through his story, it's hard to relate to him. Have any of you resurrected someone lately? Any of you been swept up into heaven? Like, how can we relate to this dude? And how could he possibly make any kind of mistake that we could learn from? Well, interestingly, James, in his New Testament letter, reminds his readers Elijah was a human being, even as we are. And then he goes on to say how God used him in such powerful ways, trying to increase our faith. And so after this confrontation, we're going to see now some of the humanity of Elijah in chapter 18. Major public victory, major declaration by Yahweh of who the one true God is, justification or vindication for Elijah as the prophet. It's a conclusive victory. Elijah then prays for rain. Rain comes on the land after 3 years. And after that, we pick up the story in the beginning of chapter 18. Now, Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done. He went and tattled to his wife, is what the king did. And how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Elijah himself didn't do that, but the people began to pursue the prophets after this victory. and they slaughtered them. They cleansed the nation from idolatry. And so Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make you or your life like one of those." That wouldn't have been a very effective threat. If you're going to do a death threat, practice it. So it's like, boom, it like really lands. "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them," that is, the prophets that were killed. Elijah was afraid and he ran for his life. What? Wait, Elijah? The one who's been standing against the king for the last 3 years, Elijah? The one who has just had this major confrontation, 850 religious prophets, fanatics. Part of Baal worship was child sacrifice. These guys were all in. He confronts them. He stands against them. Yahweh wins. Evil is dealt with. This Elijah gets a threat from the king's wife, and he is so scared that he runs for his life. That's a shocker if you don't know this story. You are not expecting that response. You're expecting something like, "Who do you think you are, Jezebel? Like, do you know what just happened on Mount Carmel? Let me fill you in a little bit. You think your little threat is going to scare me away from what God's called me to do? Haven't you figured out through this event? My God is true and real. My God is greater than yours. My God is greater. My God is stronger. God, you are maybe broke into song." That's what you would have expected. But it doesn't happen. What triggered in Elijah that he would panic and run? We don't know. Cue a whole bunch of jokes from preachers about like being scared of a woman and all this kind of stuff. I think it's more important for us to recognize that all of us have shared things that stress us out, that cause us anxiety, that scare us, or that weigh us down. And all of us have different things as well. We don't know what his life was like. We don't know why that landed for Elijah in that particular way. We don't know what kind of past trauma maybe sparked something in him. We don't know any of that. But I do know this, that what stresses me out might not stress you out. What stresses you out and causes you anxiety and weighs you down might not stress me out. We all have different things. For some of us, we might feel way more weight about our health or our finances, or watching our children struggle through a challenge, or having to be vulnerable and admit our human weakness. There's a whole bunch of different things that might land more significantly or weighty on you than on me, and other things on me than on you. But we all know what it's like to be human. To feel overwhelmed in a problem, overwhelmed by a crisis, scared, worried about what we can't control, unable to, and feel filled with shame because we can't overcome this battle in our lives. In other words, we all have problems. We have problems or crises that weigh us down, diminish our peace, disrupt our sleep, drain our joy, consume our thoughts, and possibly even overwhelm us. That's just part of what it means to be human in a broken, fallen world. And the invitation is for us to learn how to navigate those things in faith-filled trust and hope and obedience. So, in Elijah's case, it was a death threat from Jezebel. He's scared and he runs. Now let me read a good chunk of the story for you. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. Remember in Luke, we talked about wilderness. Wilderness is not just a geographical place. Wilderness is a spiritual place as well. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed. And look what he prayed. prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the bush and he fell asleep. All at once an angel touched him and said, get up and eat. He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again and fell asleep. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. So he got up and ate and drank, and strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. That's where Moses met God and the 10 Commandments were given. This is a pretty special place. Then he went into a cave and spent the night. And the word of the Lord came to him. What are you doing here, Elijah? He replied, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. Then the Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountain apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood on the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? Same question and same answer. Elijah replied, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, put your prophets to death with the sword, and I'm the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too. And the Lord said to him, go back the way you came and go to the desert of Damascus, where when you get there, anoint Hazael king over Aram, also anoint Jehu king over Israel, summary, and anoint Elisha to succeed you as the prophet. Jehu will put to death any who escape the sword of Hazael. Elisha will put to death any who escape the sword of Jehu. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal, and whose mouths have not kissed him. Okay, lots to address here. I'm going to make some observations from Elijah's life that hopefully might help us navigate the weight we carry, the problems that stress us out and give us anxiety, the crisis that we might find ourselves in. Ways that we might navigate them in faith-filled ways that are healthy for us, good for us, and that glorify God. So, let's put it under the title of this: things that often happen in our problems or in our fear or in our crises. We're going to see a number of different things, a number of different mistakes that Elijah makes. Let's name them now. First, and by the way, there's a lot of them. First, oftentimes in our crises or in the midst of our problems, we will take action too fast. It's not always the case. Sometimes we're paralyzed and we don't do anything. We can't move. But actually, oftentimes, many of us have this immediate impulse in the midst of a crisis or a challenge that's come into our lives. We want to fight or we want to flee, fight or flight. We want to try to fix the problem. We want to get out of the discomfort, which can actually often get us into more trouble. The problem gets more complex. The problem gets bigger. This is where numbing comes in for so many of us, right? I'm scared, I'm stressed, I'm anxious about this thing that I can't control. What should I do? I better eat, that'll help. I better shop, that'll give me the dopamine hit I need. I better smoke some weed just to bring down the thing. I better have a second glass of wine tonight and not just one. I better look at porn. I better scroll social media and distract myself. I need to just do something to avoid the discomfort that I feel. You know, it's interesting, if you look at chapter 17, every time Elijah moves, he's told to by God. God says, it's time to go here. You need to go here. What's interesting in chapter 18 is that God actually doesn't tell Elijah initially to go anywhere. He just goes. He flees. And it might explain the question that God actually asks Elijah, what are you doing here? Can you imagine, like, you've just fled, you haven't even thought about it, you just took off, and now you're in this little spot, and all of a sudden God's there, hey, what you up to? What brings you to this broom bush, Elijah? Oh dear. The best first action you and I can take in the midst of our distress or the problems we carry, our discombobulation, is to turn first to God, to process it with him, to express how we're feeling to him, to ask for his help, to re-find our center in him and who he is and the story that we're a part of. It's to resist this first immediate compulsion to act and to try to escape or try to fix things ourselves. One of the first mistakes we make is we take action too fast. And we could say taking it too fast means taking action without being attentive to God. I got this. I'll take care of this. I better fix it. Second, we see this in Elijah as well. One of the mistakes we make in our struggles and our problems is that we isolate ourselves. Notice in verse 3, Elijah leaves his servant and then he keeps on traveling into the wilderness. So lots of scholars would say Elijah at this point, he's burned out, he's depressed. And oftentimes when we're struggling, we choose to do something that's really natural for many of us, but it's unhelpful ultimately, and that is we isolate ourselves. I don't want to let anyone else into this and see this part of me. Or I don't want to bother other people and become a nuisance. I don't want to seem weak. There's a whole bunch of reasons why we might choose to isolate, but by and large, it's a really unhelpful choice to make. Some of you know that like 2.5 years ago now or something like that, I went on a leave for 3 months. And I needed it for a whole bunch of reasons. But one of the biggest things I needed to learn in the midst of that leave was this tendency that I have. I'm an isolator. I shell up under stress. I keep people away. And it was killing me. And I had to learn a new way of being. Isolation is actually, and I know this in my head, but in my experience, I wasn't living it out particularly well, but isolation is one of the devil's most effective tools to keep us struggling and stuck and spinning our wheels. And one of the best things we can do is to reach out to the right kind of people. To be vulnerable with a trusted friend, to seek out a mentor, to pursue some professional help if we need it. And one of the reasons we need other people in the midst of our pain or our challenges or our problems is that when we're overwhelmed and discouraged, we can often start thinking poorly. We quit thinking clearly. That's the third thing. So just track logically with Elijah for a second. Elijah runs away. Why? Because his life has been threatened. Jezebel is going to kill him. Elijah runs away, gets alone, prays to God, what? That he would die. Why would you do that? Like if you want to die, Elijah, you should have just stayed where you were. You wouldn't even have had to have prayed. So he's scared of dying, so he runs so that he can ask God to kill him. Again, sitting in a nice, comfortable seat like this, we can all know pretty illogical, right? He's not thinking clearly. How or what happens to our thinking when we're in the midst of crisis? Or when a problem hasn't resolved as quickly as we'd like and we're just getting fatigued? How does our thinking start to get warped or twisted or misconstrued? Elijah is losing perspective. And it happens to us as human beings when we go through hard time. We need people who can help us think beyond the immediate problem and help us think wisely about things. We need people who can come alongside us and give us a different perspective, walk with us towards a possible solution. But hear me, if you're trying to be that for someone else, we first need people to come and just sit with us and be with us in our pain and love us in the midst of it and not tell us that we just need to have more faith or we ought to do this. We just need someone to meet us in our pain and let us know that we're not alone. And then, in an appropriate place and an appropriate time and an appropriate way, say, I want to walk with you in this. I'm with you. You're not alone. That's why we need other people. And it'll help us process. It'll help us think more clearly. And oftentimes our thinking will become more clearly when we actually do not neglect or we undervalue our physical health. I love this story. The angel shows up to Elijah, and the angel is representative, of course, of God in this moment. And God doesn't say, hey, Elijah, wake up. We got to talk about some things. God makes a fire and bakes fresh bread. He doesn't even give him day-old stuff. He gives fresh bread and water to a fatigued and exhausted Elijah. I love that. God tells him to get some sleep. In fact, sleep is mentioned 3 times in this story, and food twice. Elijah's come off this massive event at Mount Carmel. He would have had a massive adrenaline drop in his body. That's because he's human. We know that. That would have been a total adrenaline dump, and now he's fatigued. He probably has thought at that victory, this is the moment. Finally, the nation's going to get it. Finally, all of my work is going to amount to something. And then he realizes with Jezebel's threat, things aren't going to be quite as neat and tidy and as quick as I would have hoped or liked. And so he runs. He's discouraged probably with this threat. He's been 3 years now in this. He's emotionally, he's physically, he's probably spiritually exhausted. He's burned out. Sometimes the most spiritual thing we can do is take a nap. To care about our physical health so that we can get to the point where we can think well, where we can meaningfully engage with the challenge that we find ourselves in. And so one of the best things we can do when we're feeling weighed down and we want to stay in bed and we want to stay under the covers and we don't want to be with anyone else, the best thing we can do, one of the good things we can do, let's put it that way, is we can get up and we can make ourselves a good meal, a healthy meal. We can make sure we're getting good sleep. We can be physically active. We can get outside under the sun. All of that contributes to this healthy, holistic spirituality that is the Christian life. In some cases, it might mean going and getting medical help to address the chemical imbalances in your body or in your brain so that you can just get your head above water and be in a better mental space. The point is this: we are integrated human beings. We are spiritual, we are emotional, we are cognitive, we're physical. And each part of us plays a part of us becoming healthy and healthily engaging and walking and navigating through our challenges. The stress and the trauma that we experience, we carry, not just in our head, not just in our heart, but in our body as well. We know this now. And so we want to pay attention to it all. Okay, a few more mistakes. I'm going to wrap up shortly. Here's another one that we often will do. Some of us probably are better at this than others because we're creative. We assume or we make up stories. How many of us do this? Especially when we isolate ourselves and our heads start running away from us. Our thinking. We're not actually even worried if we're dealing with reality or not. We'll just call it what ifs. I could go down this rabbit hole. I could go down this rabbit hole. This could possibly happen. This is getting bigger in my mind. Elijah gives God this resignation speech. And I think I don't know if you've ever had to go resign from something, but if you're a bit scared of your boss, you probably have practiced it a little bit, right? I think Elijah practiced this because he gets asked the question twice and his resignation speech is identical both times. It's just like, well, God, I've tried really hard, but I'm not making a difference. I think I'd like to, pursue a different thing. I think I'm gonna, go teach children in elementary school or something. I don't know what he was thinking. But Elijah just kind of gives him this speech. And in the speech, both times, he tells an untruth. I don't think Elijah is meaning to tell an untruth. He may feel like he's all alone. He probably believes that he is all alone. But it isn't actually true. And Yahweh tells him that. There's actually 7,000 people that I've reserved, Elijah, that haven't bowed down to Baal. You are far from alone. You're making assumptions. You're making things up. And you're making the problem bigger than it actually is. 6, when we're overwhelmed, when we're struggling with problems, it's really easy for us to become more and more focused on ourselves. What are you doing here, Elijah? Well, let me tell you. I've been really zealous for you, Lord. This poor me thing. This is so unfair. So easy for us to get lost in our pity parties if the challenge or the problem isn't self-inflicted. Then we just kind of pile on shame on ourselves. But if the problem's external to us, it's so easy for us then to take this sort of victim place, this powerless place. Oh, poor me. Look what's being done to me. And it might be true that something has been done to you and it's unfair and it's unkind and it's hurtful, all those sorts of things. It's important for us to be able to name that, but then it's important for us to think through, what am I going to do now with my agency to navigate this in a healthy way? If I just choose to focus on how hard I've got it, I'm never going to get out of the mess. It doesn't help solve the problem. And more so, we think about ourselves a lot, and in that kind of place where we're victim, where we're powerless, we then start to think a lot about the perpetrator too, if it's external, right? Look at those people. Listen, Lord, this is Elijah, I've been really zealous for you. But the Israelites, those knuckleheads, they've rejected your covenant. Talked about this when we talked about Adam and Eve. I'm not going to say anything more about it now, but we are so prone to blame. God asks Elijah in this moment, what are you doing here? And what he could have said was, Jezebel threatened me and I was scared, so I ran. What he does say is, God, I've got a great track record with you. I've been working zealously for the last 3 years, and the Israelites are a bunch of knuckleheads. They've torn down all the altars. He eventually gets to, and Jezebel threatened me. See, deflection, sort of not just answering the question, not wanting to deal with self. Okay, so we focus on ourselves, we blame others. This is my last one, not surprisingly. We can so easily end up excluding or blaming God. And we forget who our God is. It's one of the reasons I loved what we just sang today. Like Amy and the worship team, thank you for those words. We were declaring what's true about God and who he is. Elijah has seen God do all sorts of things for him, use him in miraculous ways, rescue him, all this stuff. And then somehow in this moment, he panics and he runs. And if we forget about who our God is And this is harder the longer a problem goes on. Some of you have been wading through things, and if it was done in 6 months or done in a year or done in 2 years, you probably would have been okay. But now this is 10 years. Now it's 12 years. Now it's 15 years. It becomes so easy for us to start to think that the problem is more powerful than our God. It's so easy for us to lose faith, become despondent, become despairing, and perhaps even hopeless. That's why we need to keep coming to places like this, even if you don't feel it. Even if you don't feel like when we sing these songs that are true about who God is, you're being reminded this is who our God is. Faith, let it rise up in me. Talk to yourself like David did. Come on, soul. This is true even though you don't feel it. Believe it. Trust him in this particular moment of your life. I'm going to conclude with this. Those are a whole bunch of really important things that we can do and mistakes to avoid so that we can navigate healthily through our problems that can sometimes feel like they're overwhelming us. I have to say what God does here. I love this God who comes and makes breakfast and provides for a tired, worn out, burned out, mistakenly praying saint. I love that God tenderly meets with Elijah. I love that God does we could do a whole sermon on the earthquake, the wind, the fire, the still small voice. I think God, in doing some of that, why did he do that? I think one of the reasons God was doing that was, hey, Elijah, I know you've just had a Mount Carmel experience, and now you'd probably like another spectacular experience to get you out of the funk that you're in. But you need to know this, Elijah. I'm not just present at Mount Carmel. I'm present with you in this lonely, depressed, anxious place that you find yourself in. I'm in both places. I'm with you. See, the still small voice isn't powerful and grandiose and spectacular. It's intimate. It's close. It's a way of speaking. It's a whisper in an ear. Like a good friend might come up to you and just say, I know, it's hard, I got you. Or a spouse might whisper into their spouse's ear. I see you. I know this is hard. I'm with you. That's the still small voice. Seen, known, close, personal. That's the God of the Bible. The Mount Carmel and the depressed cave. I'm going to invite the worship team to come up now. And we are going to first just remind ourselves of the gospel. Because again, this is the truth of our God, whether we feel it or not. And then we're going to just end with a slower song of worship and adoration to God. And as we wrap up our services, we're going to give you the opportunity to come and receive prayer. If you are in the midst of a valley, if you're in the midst of a struggle, a problem, a crisis, and it would be helpful for you to just name that, maybe for the first time, to someone and invite them into prayer with you and for you. There's going to be some people here that up front who would love to pray with you and journey with you and encourage you through their prayers. So would you please stand with us now?